We are live.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. I wasn't sure if Kyan was going to introduce me, but maybe I don't need an introduction. But my name's Raj Sabharwal. I am one of the owners of Glass Revolution Imports, and we have the privilege of importing Amrut Single Malt from India. We launched Amrut into the U.S. in 2010, late 2009, early 2010. Took a gamble on it. I mean, back then, I'll tell you, in 2009, when I was contacted, I just moved from Canada to the U.S. and my partners, my friends in Canada who were handling Amrut in the West, contacted me and said, "Oh, we got this Indian whiskey that want to get into the U.S." And my first inclination was, "There's no good Indian whiskey. What are you talking about?" Because all of the times I had gone to India to visit family, my cousins would ply us with whiskey, and my brother and I would go, what the hell is this stuff? But anyway, we drank it. We enjoyed it for whatever it was worth. Because a lot of you know that Indian whiskey, when you buy it in India, it's could not be sold as whiskey anywhere else in the world, because it is usually made from a neutral molasses spirit with some imported or some grain or malt whiskey added to it. It has the affectionate name of being called the foreign. Can't remember, international foreign malt whiskey or something. It's like they don't have a category for it.
IMFL.
So, IMFL. Thank you. So international flavored malt liquor. So it's something that's imitating something that's another foreign product. And 5 of the 10 top selling whiskey, if you want to use whiskey as a broad category, are Indian. And India is the largest consumer of whiskey in the world. But again, that's the whiskey that exists today. And in 2004, so Amrut's been around since 1948. We're celebrating 75 years this year. And in 2004, when they launched the single malt, the classic single malt, Neil, who was at that time the managing director, said to his son that we're not going to launch this in India because in the domestic market, they won't appreciate, they won't understand it, they won't get it. So we're going to launch it as export only. And where do you think they went first? Scotland, right? So there's an old expression about, taking coal to Newcastle or selling ice to the Inuit. So if the feeling was, if we can make it in Scotland, we should be able to make it anywhere. So they tried that and they launched it in August of 2004. So 20 years ago was when they first launched it. And this is, if you can see it, this is actually a bottle of the first ever Amrut release. And you'll notice that it was bottled at 40% ABV. This is in a green bottle, and it was if it was a clear bottle, you'd be able to tell it was chill filtered. It did have a little bit of color added to it, because that's what you did. But that's what they launched, and a lot of the feedback was, have a higher ABV, don't add coloring to it, don't chill filter it. So they learned a lot from that first period. But I think one day I will open this. But right now, this is a collector's item because it is the first ever first release of Amrut Single Malt. So Amrut, again, family-owned distillery, and a lot of they started making single malts in the late 1980s, mostly to use as a flavoring agent in their premium whiskey that they were selling in the domestic market. It's called MacQ or Macintosh, Maquintosh, and that's their flagship domestic whiskey, or was back then. But the problem happened in the early 90s. Pernod and some other foreign producers started entering the Indian market and decided that the way to sell things and really make a go at it was by diluting the flavor profile and making, much like what blended whiskeys are today compared to what they were in the 30s or 40s or 50s. So they were able to produce and introduce a cheaper whiskey product into India. And so a lot of consumers gravitated towards that because they were able to buy something for a lot less. They just assumed that it was whiskey. And so what happened is Amrut was, well, what are we going to do with all these barrels of single malt we have? We can't do much else with it. So that's when they started exploring whether or not international sales would work. So just a bit of background on it. It's still family owned. It's still family run. And as you can imagine, for those of you who have had Amrut before, it's just such a great product, and they get offers every day to be bought out, and the family as well. What are we? I mean, if it doesn't matter how much money you give us, what are we going to do? We like what we're doing, and we're going to continue to do what we're doing. So. The distillery is still on the original location. The old distillery had a capacity of about 300,000 liters of alcohol a year, which turned out not to be enough. So they built a new distillery next to the first one on the same land site, and now they have a capacity of 1 million liters of pure alcohol a year, which is only dedicated to single malt. They do make other products as well, gin, rum, vodka, brandy, etc. But that's it. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of people want to get into the tasting, and I saw some notes about what is the tasting order. So we're going to start with the classic single malt, which is the one in the yellow container. And if you haven't poured anything, pour it. So these mini bottles are actual replicas of the full bottles. So it's a great way to, you're getting exactly the same product, the same packaging that you're getting. So the classic single malt is made from 100% Indian barley. The barley grows up in the north of India, in Punjab and Rajasthan, which is known as the breadbasket of India. The Indian barley is a 6-row barley rather than 2-row, which is traditionally used in Scotland and most other markets. And the reason there's a 6-row barley is that when there was a demand following the exit of the British for brewing and distilling, there was a lot of pushback from people saying, well, you can't take food away from the people to make alcohol. So the Agricultural Commission developed a strain of barley that is only used for brewing and distilling, and that hence the 6-row barley. There's a lot of barley, a lot of grain and wheat used in India for consumption. I mean, having a wheat-based product for all 3 meals is very common in the northern India. In the south, there's a lot more rice that's consumed, but they obviously didn't want to alienate the people, and so they started doing that, getting the barley from there. So this is all 100% Indian barley, distilled and matured at Amrut in Bengluru. Now, Bengluru is in the south of India. It's south central. It's 3,000 feet above sea level, and that really affects the maturation aspect of it. So Bengluru used to be known as the Garden City. A lot of in the 50s, a lot of retirees, a lot of ex-military people decided to retire there. Beautiful climate, lovely greenery, great place to live. Hence, but today it is the fastest growing city in India. Now there's 14 million people living in Bangalore, when there used to be like 500,000 back in the 50s. So you can see how much it's grown. But the climate is, in the winter, you get about 70, 75 degrees and about 35 or 40% humidity. In the summer, about 120, 125 degrees with about 75% humidity. So it's still pretty dry all year round. And the interesting thing is, at times of the day, especially like between 3 and 5 o'clock in the morning, the temperature really dips. And so you get these huge swings in the expansion and contraction of the barrels, which really contributes to this. So if you think about it, the dryness and the heat, the angel share at Amrut is 10 to 15% a year, averaging about 12% a year. So if you think about it, in 5 years, 50% of your barrels evaporated. But because it's drier, the alcohol strength goes up. They're losing more water. So Ashok, who's the head distiller, likes to say that Amrut is the missing link between Scotland and Kentucky, because they're making single malt like they make in Scotland, but it's maturing like it would in Kentucky. Because Kentucky, as you know, tends to be drier. You get that heat, and you do get those huge swings where they're losing more water than alcohol, and the alcohol strength goes up from the barrel fill level. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the first whiskey, the classic single malt. You can see you are all enjoying it. Any comments about it?
I'll go. What I always love about Amrut in particular is a lot of the fruit notes that I get in the front and the mid of the palate. That's always very, very enjoyable, and it keeps it, even though it's, with the climate, a lot of the oak tannin comes in pretty quickly. It still keeps that freshness to it with some of the fruit notes.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. I mean, I think it's a nod to the quality of cask that they use, and obviously where it's matured, and the runs. I mean, Amrut has a very long distillation process, almost 7 days of distillation. A fermentation, and then
7 days.
Very slow distillation process. So that a lot of that contributes to the fruity characters and the big fruit notes. I mean, traditionally, Amrut is known for having that ripe fruit, fennel, orange, apple notes that are inherent in their new made spirit.
I don't know. This reminds me more of a pear than it does apple.
Yeah, pear. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely, pear. Yeah, yeah, or pear, or like Asian pear, almost, or that kind of flavor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was about to say I get pear from the nose. I get pear as well as the palate.
Yeah, but it's interesting because on the palate you get a little bit of that spice notes, and we always joke that it's an Indian whiskey, so you have to have some spices in there. But you do get that spicy notes in there, and
the fennel's really strong.
That's what, sorry?
The fennel also.
Yes, the fennel is strong. And what's interesting is Ashok took over distilling about 4 years ago, and he tweaked the original recipe slightly. So what you're tasting right now is has a little bit of about 5% sherry matured single malt in there, 95% ex bourbon. There's a little bit of new American oak maturation whiskey as well, and then about 0.5% of peated malt is in there. So there is a hint of peat in there, but certainly that little bit of sherry has rounded it out and made it a little robust. So it's vastly different from the first few releases. If you look at the canister, the label, the back label will actually tell you the batch number and the bottling date, and they have to do that legally in India. So there are people I know who started collecting, like they have batch 1, batch 2, whatever. I think what you have now is probably 130 or 150 or something. I don't know what number you have there, but
186.
186.
186. There you go. So that's how many they've had. So it's quite interesting. So yeah. What do you think about?
And I will say,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I will say, every day you taste things slightly differently.
Yes.
But what's kind of getting me today is I definitely get the pear and a bit of the fennel, like the fresh vegetative fennel on the nose. But on the palate, it's kind of moving into a juicy peach mango with an end of acidity, spice, and almost like a tagine kind of thing going on.
Wow. I like that. That's great.
I was waiting to hear mango. I didn't hear mango from anybody. That's why I kept quiet. Yeah, I get a lot of mango.
You're getting it too, right?
Yeah.
And I'm reserving my comments for Triparva because I've done enough of these tastings, so I want to reserve my comments for Triparva.
All right. So it's interesting. I was doing a talk for my alumni association last night. I went to University of Toronto and we did just a story, my story, and people were saying, well, when you lead tastings, how do you do it? And I said, well, one thing I do not do is tell people what they're going to taste. I said, because I just think that's ridiculous. Because if I tell you that, oh, I'm getting mango or guava or sea urchin, and if you've never had any of those things, you have no clue of what I'm talking about or what to expect. And every one of us, as Paul said, tastes differently. And the time of day, where you are, who you're with, it's going to affect what you're tasting as well. So I leave it up to people.
What you ate earlier in the day is going to affect how it tastes.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. So I just like people. I don't like to lead people into what they should be tasting. I want people to appreciate and have their own stories about what they're tasting and why they're tasting it. So I think that makes a lot more sense. So, all right, should we go on to whiskey number 2? All right, number 2 is the same whiskey just had, but the cask strength version of it. So it is 61.8 or 123.6 proof. So exactly the same whiskey you just had, but just done at the cask strength version. Now I will throw a caveat into the cask strength releases. You'll notice that the peated cask strength is 62.8, and it's always that. And how can cask strength for that, the peated, and how can cask strength for the regular one always be 61.8? Well, the regulations in India are such that they cannot bottle anything higher than the strength at which they put it into the barrel at. So Amrut fills the barrels at 62.8, which is the highest that they are legally allowed to bottle it at. But I talked about the maturation earlier and the angel share and the fact that it loses more water than alcohol. So after 6 or 7 years, their strength there of the new make or the whiskey is approaching 70% or 140 proof. But unfortunately, they can't bottle it at that. A number of years ago, we did the oldest whiskey that Amrut's done so far is the Greedy Angels 12-year-old. And in the packaging, they included a little miniature, a 50 ml of the cask strength, but they had to get special permission from the government to do that. And so there was only a limited number of those bottled, and it was 73.5 or something that was bottled at. But this one, the 12-year-old, 2 250-liter casks, so 500 liters. At the end of 12 years, how much do you think they had left? More than one. 93 liters.
Well, I was going to say one cask, but...
Yeah, wow, less than one cask. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 93 liters, that's how much they lost in that period of time. So we like to say 1 year in Bengluru is like 3 years in Scotland. And if you're going to equate it to something, but obviously the factors, there's a lot of other mitigating factors that affect it. So yeah. So grab the cask strength. Nose. I mean, obviously with the higher alcohol, it's going to be a little more closed on the nose. But the thing I think a lot of you also appreciate this, that cask strength is where it's at. Cask strength is going to give you a lot more of the character of the whiskey. You can always add water. You can't take water out of something, but the fact that this is 123.6 proof, it still drinks really well. It doesn't need to have water added to it. It has a lot of great character and a lot of great flavor going on there. You don't get that. You don't get that burn. You don't get that super tannic that you might get from something. I mean, these are 5-year-old whiskeys, but 5 years in Bengluru is, as I said earlier, 3 to 1. So like 12 to 15 years in Scotland. If you
I think I prefer the standard bottling, actually.
You do? Okay.
Yeah. I think the lower proof really allows that fruit character to come forward. And I don't know. I find the mouthfeel is better on the cask strength. But I think the flavor profile is, I don't know. I like to leave it to the distiller. I'm not a huge fan of all the cask strength stuff. I mean, right. I like it, but I prefer to let the distiller tell, the story.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. But that's, again, I always think that a cask strength whiskey, you're getting better value from it because you're not paying for water. You're paying for, the alcohol. You can add as much or as little water as you want. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think that when you get down to a certain level, it's more palatable. I mean, there's a lot of who are distillers or involved in distilling that really, when you want to taste the true essence and flavor of a whiskey, you draw from the barrel and you're going to add probably an equal amount of water into it. So you're actually bringing it down to about 35, 36%. So 70, 72%, which isn't really legally whiskey anymore, right? But that's where you really get the true flavor profile of what it's all about. There's enough whiskey
Plus,
there.
It's greener too, because you're not transporting more and more water thousands of miles for no reason.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah. Good point.
I'm leaning it more towards the cask strength on this one. For me, it's rounder. The fruits are still certainly there, but there's more tertiary notes. I get a lot more like hazelnut and some of those nutty components on this, whereas the other, they were kind of hidden behind the fruit. Here, it's a little bit more, and maybe it's because it's got a little bit more of that richer, a little bit more viscous palate weight to it. But it's really quite nice. Really quite nice.
Well, I certainly agree with you. I mean, you certainly get a lot more texture, which texture is so important in anything, whether it's wine or spirit. I mean, texture is going to give you that richness and roundness, and it's going to really affect your palate and where you taste things. I mean, if you put something in your mouth that's a lot lighter, it's going to take further for the liquid to go down your tongue before you really pick up the flavors. Whereas if it's higher in alcohol and you get more texture, you're going to pick up stuff all over your mouth, and a lot more of it. So, yeah.
And the fruit in this one for me is starting to express itself more as that classic, green apple versus some of the, juicier, more tropical fruits in this.
So you're losing out on the pear.
Yeah.
And the mango, you're going more to the green apple. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I am definitely getting that structure of nuttiness too. So it does kind of lead to the question. They definitely have the same kind of proportion of sherry barrel influence in the mix, or
it's exactly the same. I mean, this is taken and then it's obviously watered down to make the 46%. And Amrut, a lot of people, no one's asked the question yet, but I often get asked this is like, oh, where does the water come from? Because a lot of people naively think that, oh, the water in India is not any good. But Neil, who passed away 3 years ago, who was the managing director of Amrut, and who's really instrumental in introducing Amrut single malt to the world, he had the foresight to buy a farm about 2 miles from the distillery that was adjacent to a beautiful, pristine lake. And they were able to drop a deep bore well about a mile down into the lake to draw water from. So the water gets pumped out right onto the farm, and trucks come in and they take the water from there. They'll take it to the distillery, which is 2 miles away. So you're getting fresh pumped water that's going over there. But when it gets to the distillery, they still put it through a reverse osmosis process before they use it in any of their mashing, the distillation, proofing down of the whiskeys. Yeah. So it's not water that's been heavily polluted or anything. So
I'm getting a little green mango along with this. Green mango, and somehow I don't know. I tasted a little raisin somewhere.
there is a little raisin. I think that's probably, Keith, a little bit from the sherry influence. You're getting a little bit.
I was just about to
fruit.
say raisins from the sherry.
Yeah, definitely.
If you ever had like a sherry bomb scotch, you get raisins all day on that.
Yeah.
Again, I mean that depends if you're Oloroso or PX. It's going to make a difference, but you're definitely going to get that fruity notes coming from the sherry. Yeah.
It definitely.
Do you guys use PX and Oloroso, or just PX?
For the single malt, it's Oloroso. But for some of their special releases, they're using PX.
Okay.
And there is some. So there's currently available a whiskey called Bagheera from Amrut, which is 80% of the single malt, 20% matured in PX cask.
Nice.
And one question. Go ahead.
So I really love how this one just lingers in your mouth. The not the finish of the whiskey, but just the lingering of it because it's cask strength. It's got such a long linger where those flavors that everybody's talking about, they kind of just coast out, and that's what I'm really liking about this cask strength one. So
Yeah, I agree. All right. I mean, it does have a long finish. It lingers, and you get a lot of nuanced flavors developing as it sits in your mouth. Again, I mean, it's attributable to the higher proof, but also along with the higher proof, you get more of the flavors, the natural flavors coming in.
And about the geography near the distillery, you said it was 3,000 feet. Is it relatively like mountainous in that area, or is that further south?
So around surrounding Bengluru, and Bengluru is obviously on the hill, but surrounding it, there's something called the Nilgiris, which is the Blue Mountains. They're about 150, 200 miles from there. And in the Nilgiris, there's a lot of coffee, tea plantations, a lot of other spices that grow there. So the whole area, as you leave Bengluru and you go further south and west, you're going to get a lot more mountainous regions.
Mountainous, but it's also a heavily agricultural area too. Huh?
It's not as agricultural. I mean, the mountain area, the foothills and the mountains are going to be more agricultural, but certainly it's not as agricultural as the north of India, just because you have more arable land that you can use to grow things in. You've got more vast land you can use, and and you're closer to the source of water because you get the runoff from the Himalayas, and it comes down and it feeds through Punjab and Rajasthan and other places. I mean, if you've ever been to Rajasthan and you're there in the summer, you'll drive across these, you think are bridges, but they're dry beds. But when the monsoons come and the heavy rains come, or the melt comes on, these rivers are just incredible. But for a large part of the year, it's dry.
And so specifically, I was asking this in terms of, like, is the water source in the lake, is that kind of mountain water runoff? But it sounds like that's probably not the case. That would be further north near the Himalayas, where you would get more of that mountain water runoff. Okay.
No, Raj, this is a mountain water runoff. These are whole Vindhyas. Vindhyas are a chain of mountains, just like Himalayas is on the north. Vindhyas are on the south. And Bengluru sits right on top of it. And there are, and Nilgiris, as Raj mentioned, is really lush green with, and of course, the south is a spice basket of the world. I mean, pretty much every spice comes from south, and coffee and tea. Right. Yeah. So the cash crops are grown in the south. I mean, India has two growing seasons, Rabi and Kharif. Kharif is, pre-monsoon, and Rabi is post-monsoon. So the south is dense in vegetation, palm, most of south is coastal. Yeah, and north is by the Ganges, what Raj mentions, Punjab, which is the breadbasket, which mostly grows more of commercial crops like corn and wheat. But rice is grown both sides, but the basmati that you eat is from north, and the other varietal of rice is from the south. But south is mostly known for coffee and tea plantations.
Yeah, and the nut trees, cashews. A lot of the spices, ginger, clove. Cardamom.
I mean, I come from there. My family owns a coffee plantation and cardamom and pepper. So I'm about 200 miles from the distillery, Amrut.
Yeah. So it's a vast country, and geographically, size-wise, it's not huge, but the spread of it and obviously the variation from north to south and east to west is tremendous.
And the biodiversity.
Yeah, and a country that now has 1.4 billion people, it's just remarkable that what goes on. So
precisely because of the way the geographical structure and the weather climate, that's why India is called subcontinent. Because it's pretty much, it has all the climatic variations from subtropical, tropical, Saharan desert, which Raj mentioned in Rajasthan. And then you come down, you get monsoon or tropical monsoon. So it pretty much covers all the climatic. The only two things that are missing in India are tundra and taiga.
Well, and that's not a bad thing.
All right. Okay, so we're going to move to number 3, which is totally different. This is a special release called Triparva. Triparva is the only triple distilled single malt made in Asia. This is the second release of it. And, when a lot of people think triple distilled, automatically the mind goes to Irish whiskies, which are triple distilled, or the stuff from the Scottish lowlands, triple distilled, and you expect a lighter, more heathery, floral kind of whiskey. But you will find that this is a different triple distilled. This is, has a lot more character, a lot more robustness, a lot more depth in there. The first time I ever had this, I think the last release was 5 years ago, and it was like, wow, how can this be a triple distilled whiskey? But it's just the art and science that they use in their distillation. The long fermentation obviously gives you a lot more flavor characters that come in there. And this is bottled at 100 proof or 50% alcohol.
Right off the bat, spicy. Very gingery.
It is.
It's like peach juice.
Peach juice. I like that.
It's so good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Wow.
getting rum like ripe banana, plantain,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
overripe tropical
and
fruit.
Paul, a lot of that comes from the long fermentation. You're going to get some malolactic fermentation going on, so
Yep.
you pick up that banana, plantain, characters that come out of there. Yep.
And can we touch on that a little bit more? Because I was going to ask that question. This is the same fermentation as.
Absolutely.
Wow.
It's the same distillate that would have been used to make the single malt, but obviously the maturation is different. But this is the same absolute distillation, but then it goes through a third distillation. And Ashok has warned me to tell everyone that this is the last time they're making this, because it takes a lot of time and the yield is very low. Because obviously, when you go through a third distillation, you're losing a lot more, and so you don't, that's why it's more expensive. But it unfortunately will be the last Triparva or triple distill that comes out of Amrut.
This is it's lovely.
It is, yes.
It's complete. It's a different animal. It's like a completely different whiskey. This is amazing.
It feels like
Really lovely.
Feels like it has multiple stats. It's not like I feel like there's like.
I have a bottle of Napo Castle 21 year, which is Irish whiskey.
Yep.
I'm saving some back because in a couple nights I'm going to do a side by side. This reminds me of that so much.
Interesting.
Which is a good thing because I love that bottle, and the price point on this is probably a lot cheaper than that 21 year old.
Yeah, I mean, this is still going to be about 100 plus, probably 130, 140.
Yeah, I think the Napo 21 year is like 250.
Sorry, how much is it, Kane? 150?
150, yeah, plus taxes.
Yeah, so it's $100 cheaper, and from what I remember, it tastes pretty much exactly the same. I'm sure if I do a side by side, I'll find differences, but it reminds me of it for sure.
Okay.
Can you talk a bit about the still, and is it 3 times through what you're getting?
So
the
they
third
have in the new distillery that was built 5 years ago, where they have 2 spirit stills and 2 wash stills. The wash stills, I'm trying to remember the size of them. Obviously, they're a little larger than the spirit stills, but 100% copper, domestically made. And the funny story is for the old distillery, when Neil wanted to start making single malts, he showed a photograph of a pot still to a local coppersmith and said, "Make me this." And he'd never made one before, so they were one of the first ones to have a pot still there. So they have the 2 old pot stills are still there in the old distillery, and they still use them. But if you go to the new distillery, so the third run would go obviously through the spirit still again for the third time.
Wow.
And all the same barley, all Indian barley, same yeast strain, same long fermentation.
No worm though, right? This is there's no worm for condensing. It's just like standard condenser.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
No worm.
Yeah.
This nose is so misleading. On nose, it's papaya, a lot of tropical, but the moment you sip it, it's ginger, and I get a lot of wood. And it's incredible. Long finish, really long finish.
Yeah.
Yeah, the finish has a little salted caramel.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that. Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes from the influence, obviously, of the barrels, the ex-bourbon barrels, and a little bit of, I think they probably use a little bit of New American oak as well. So you're getting a little more of the caramel character coming in there.
Call me crazy, but the sweetness is a little bit lighter to me, and it's coming in as like agave syrup and lemongrass.
So I can see that citrusy, spicy notes coming in there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I get slightly minty, but I didn't get the lemongrass. I'm getting a hint of mint.
Yeah, but again, I love these kind of discussions because everyone's going to pick up different notes, different tastes, right? So
Yeah, Raj, I always wanted to ask you, what kind of yeast is used at the distillery? I mean, do they have a proprietary yeast or just a distiller's yeast?
just a distiller's yeast. Yeah, I've talked to them about using, trying to get a proprietary yeast. Unfortunately, the distillery isn't old enough to have, their own yeast strains growing in their wild yeast or anything else like that. So they have to use, the yeast strain. But, they've done, I think Ashok's doing some more experimentation. He's certainly experimenting with different types of barley. He just brought in, when I was there last year, he had brought in some Australian barley. He's got some Argentinian barley. Where else? A few other places they're experimenting with, but he has not yet ventured into experimenting with different yeast strains.
And does the pot have long neck or short neck? I mean,
they're a medium neck, so they're not super high, but they are. And then the angle is, I'm trying to remember the degree of the angle. I can send some photos later, or if you just go onto the website, you'll see photos of the stills, and you can see that. But it's
and the barrel entry proof is 125, right?
125.6. Yeah.
And so the yeast that's used is a distiller's / champagne yeast type strain, or
correct?
Like kind of, yeah.
Yeah, it's whatever they've used, and they continue to use it. I mean, but again, they're getting in. Shook's trying to get into doing some different things, and at least because it's family owned, they get to do a lot more experimentation. You wouldn't have seen things like this triple distilled or Narangi or Spectrum or so many others that they just continue to do. And next year there's going to be a lot more experimental things coming out, which I can't wait for. So yeah, and fortunately, when I visit the distillery, I get to try all these different things. And
so this one also finished in a sherry cask.
I'm sorry.
This one was also finished in a sherry cask.
No, this is all ex-bourbon cask.
Oh, okay. Yep. And the dryness I'm getting must be coming from somewhere else. Okay.
Yeah, there's no sherry influence in the Triparva. Yeah.
It's funny. It's like after chasing it with some water, I'm getting a very long, like a very almost artificial mango candy type of taste on the tongue right now.
Oh, like one of those mango candies, like the.
Yeah.
Have you ever had those? There's I think it's called Gin-Gins. They make a ginger mango hard candy, and that often.
Never had those.
Yeah, those. So you can find those. Whole Foods or other places have them, but if you can get that and have that, I think that'll give you the notes that you're picking up.
Getting like a sour apple cotton candy.
Yeah, but they're not. It's not. I mean, it's not. You're right. It's like that. It's not like the Jolly Ranger sour apple, but the ginger and mango ones are a little sweeter, and obviously the mango influences in there. Yeah.
You get like, I don't know if it's a good description, but a lot of what that is, kind of as I experience it, is that kind of like slightly phenolic thing that you get that's not a wood phenolic that you get from great lambics and sour beers. And I attribute a lot of that mentally to like the yeast and the fermentation time, like with dunder and rum and all of that stuff. But there's that great like funk that's going on at the edge of it that's absolutely fantastic.
I like that. It's a good comments, Paul. I will remember those. I mean, again, it's a great learning because I can share knowledge, but I get as much from groups like you as I do by giving. So I appreciate that.
And I think this is one where like you don't want to expose it to too much oxygen too long.
Right.
It really feels like that would be like a less pleasant experience for this particular whiskey. but it's great immediately out of the bottle.
Yeah, what I haven't done yet is I was just seeing if I had it, was to compare the first release to this one, just to see how different it is. This one matured a little bit longer. This was I think this is 5 years. The first one was the first one is 5 years. I think it's a little longer. Not sure.
How many Triparvas have been released so far?
This is the second one, and this is it. There'll be no more. Yeah.
Well, I'll be drinking the rest of this with a sour saison beer because it's fantastic.
I like it. Good. All right. Any other thoughts on the Triparva or the single malt, the cask strength single malt? All right. So we're going to move into the realm of peated, and your next whiskey is Fusion. I would hope that a lot of you have had Fusion before. If you haven't, shame on you. But this will certainly give you that. So Fusion was what put Amrut on the global map. So Fusion was released late in 2009. That year, Malt Maniacs named it Best Daily Dram. Malt Advocate, or back then it was called Malt Advocate, now it's Whiskey Advocate, called it World Whiskey of the Year. It won a number of awards and continues to win awards. So what they did for Fusion is they took the single malt that you had previously, took anywhere from 75 to 80% of that, and then married it with 20 or 25% of peated, and let it sit in casks for married casks for about 6 months before bottling it. So you're getting a little bit of that peated influence, and still the classic Amrut influence. They wanted to be careful. They wanted to maintain the traditional Amrut character, but they want to introduce a little bit of that peated note in there. So there's no peated barley in India. There's no peat in India. So the peated barley for this, Amrut gets from Baird malting in Inverness, and it is malted to their specifications. The barley is shipped from there to India, and everything else is done at the distillery. So they make a separate peated whiskey and a separate unpeated barley whiskey.
Raj, what's the ppm on this one?
Well, that's a good question, because in the bottle or in the glass, it's probably going to be about 6 to 8 ppm in Fusion. So it's pretty light, maybe even a little lighter. I mean, this is, to me, if you want to look at something equivalent, you're going to look at Talisker, maybe some older Bamors or Jura, that kind of style. As far as the peat, I mean, it's sometimes you get it's funny because every batch is different. Sometimes you get the peat right on the top. Other times you won't really hit the peat or you won't notice the peat until it hits the back of the throat, which makes Fusion really unique. But it's still the flagship whiskey. I mean, they were the first ones to do something like this and release it, and when it came out, people were just blown away by this, and it still continues to be their flagship, their number one seller.
What's the origin of the name?
Thank you. Good question. I should have said that at the beginning. Amrut is a Sanskrit word meaning nectar of the gods or water of life. So
Elixir.
The story goes that the demons and the gods were having a battle, and they were having a tug of war in the ocean, and they had this big serpent that was wrapped around this Mount Meru, which is in the water. And so they were pulling back and forth. And what happened is that the mountain started to churn, and the water started to move and to churn, and out of the waters came this pot that had nectar in it, and the gods drank from it, and that gave them eternal life, and it was called Amrut or Amruta, and that's where the name came from. So it's very, very similar to whiskey or uskabak, same origins for where the name came from. But Neil had Neil's father had the foresight to call it Amrut.
Very cool.
And if anyone here been to Cambodia? So if you go to Cambodia and you go to the ruins and stuff like that, you will actually, one of the bas reliefs when you're touring through the temple grounds is actually a scene from the Ramayana, the holy Hindu book, with the container coming out of the water and the gods sort of drinking from it. So I had my wife take a picture of me.
The whole process is called Amrut Manthan, where two people Amrut Manthan. Yeah, it's in Angkor Wat. You'll see a lot of it.
Right, that's right. I'm saying So a lot of other places too, but that's where the origin comes from. And I've only ever had one person, sort of complain about, oh, you shouldn't be calling it that, and because it's got religious connotations. And I said, well, it's the same. The word whiskey comes from the water of life, uskabak, which is the same as where Amrut comes from, and so no one's saying it's drink it and it's going to give you eternal life. But if somebody implies that, we're fine.
So I thought it was the fusion that I have, which is I have one bottle of Amrut, which is the only thing I've ever tried. And I thought it was the fusion, but I just looked and it's the intermediate sherry that I have. That's a that's a very good bottle.
It is. And that's rare. We can talk about some of the rare releases they've done later, Stan, but that's a very one of the special bottlings that they've done. Just like Triparva. I mean, so far to date, Amrut has released 42 different expressions. There's only
I don't typically like peat, but the fusion is pretty good, I think.
I think the fusion is pretty good. Yeah.
But as soon as I tried it, I knew it wasn't what I have. So once I tried it, I was like, this isn't what I have. So I got up and looked at it. I was like, but it's good.
What were you saying, Keith?
Oh no, I mean, that it's a perfect marriage of that peatness with the mango sweetness. I mean, and I mean, you could taste a little of the saltiness. With it too. I mean, it's it's a pretty good marriage of it.
Yeah, you're getting more at the back of the tongue. You're getting more of that saltiness, and then when it hits your throat, you get a little bit of that smoky character. I mean, this is mainland peat, right? It's not Isla peat, so you're not going to get that iodine medicinal qualities that you get from Isla peat.
But it has that fruitiness, sweetness.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And this is bottled at 100 proof as well, so it's a little more depth to it.
There's a nice
Raj, is there any Scottish malt in this? Scotch malt?
Oh, well, there's malt that has been. Sorry, there's barley that's been malted in Scotland, but the term Scottish malt is misleading because there's not enough barley that's grown in Scotland to satisfy the demand for making whiskey. So most of the malting facilities, malting houses, they'll get barley from wherever. So you don't know if it's coming from England or Scotland or from Ukraine or from Canada or the Middle East or wherever, but it's especially the big distillers want to get the cheapest barley they can, right? So the price of barley is fixed. So unless you specify or unless you're growing your own barley, you're going to get whatever is available on the market, the commodity market. So there isn't, to use the term Scottish malt or Scottish barley, I think is misleading in my mind.
So I don't know if you said this or not, but what percentage of the mash bill is that peat, the peated malt?
So,
is it 100% or?
Right. So it's not, the barleys don't get combined, Laura. The two whiskeys are made separately.
Okay.
And then they take anywhere from 75 to 80% of the single malt and the balance of the peated single malt that have been totally matured separately, and then they're married together.
I see. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. So they're not combining the two barleys in the.
Well, Laura, that's what I wanted, because you asked why fusion, so that's why it's fusion. Yeah,
it's a fusion, and that's where the name comes from. It's a fusion of barley from India and barley from Scotland. But I guess I'm a little a nudge for having like clarity on things, and so I hate to, on the back of it they go, oh, peated Scottish barley, and I think, well, it's not Scottish barley. It's barley from Scotland that's been peated in Scotland. So it's just a clarification, and
Scottish malt house.
Yeah, and a lot of you who are more whiskey aficionados hopefully would appreciate that the clarity of exactly what it is.
So it might be Scottish malt, but it's not Scottish barley necessarily, but it might be.
It might be, and you never know.
Some of
every batch, when you order barley, peated barley. So Amrut will say to Baird, we need container load of malted barley. We want it malted to, I think they usually order it 18 to 20 ppm, maybe a little higher, 22 ppm. So it gets malted, but don't forget that as soon as you malt something with peat, the peat level starts to dissipate, right? So as soon as it's put in the bags and it's shipped over, by the time it gets to India, the phenols have already dropped off. And then when you distill, you're going to lose more. In the barrels, you're going to lose more. And the longer it sits in barrels, the less phenolic compounds you're going to have, right? So a 40-year-old Lafroig or Kalila is not going to have that big, bold phenols that you get from like a younger Islay whiskey. So like I'm surprised it took Lagavulin so long to release an 8-year-old, because if you compare that to the 16, I love the 16, but if you want a true essence of what peat is like, have the 8-year-old or have the Ardbeg Wee Beastie or any of those. That will really tell you what peat is. You're not going to get that at the older stage.
Well,
right. So if we're talking about peat, why don't we move to the peated single malt? So this is the 40% version. This will be in the gray tin. I'm just going to grab mine. It's over here.
How many of you are peat heads here?
I appreciate a peat, but it's not my primary goal. So,
oh no, I love peat. I mean, the very first time I tried peat, which was Ardbeg, I've never gone.
Ardbeg does seem to be the gateway peat.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny for me. So I'm thinking like 35 years ago. I was at a friend's house, a business colleague, and he said, "Hey, I just got this new whiskey, a Lafroig quarter cask." And I go, "Okay." So first time I ever tried it, I was like, "Wow, what is this? Can I have a little bit more?" And that was the first time I ever had like a heavily peated malt, and it sent me on the journey of like, why are these so different? Like, because back in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, growing up in Canada, we had very little availability for Scottish single malts. So Glenfiddich was like the go-to. That was it. I mean, at home, my dad always had Johnny Walker Black and Chivas 25. So those are the whiskeys that we grew up around.
I mean, I always thought Glenfiddich was peated for a few years there. I just didn't even understand the difference.
Well, a long time back in the 1800s, a lot of Speyside whiskeys had a little bit of peat in them.
That was not, however, what I was tasting.
No, I know. I'm just saying that. I was trying to give you a little limp to get away with that. But
I actually have in my collection a peated Macallan.
Yes.
Before they went sherry crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be incredible. I would like to try that.
Before I realized how rare it was, I had like 4 or 5 bottles. And I brought it to people to taste, and I'm like, you say you love Macallan? Taste this. See if you really like it.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of examples of distilleries, that don't make peated whiskey anymore that used to have some peated whiskey, or look at
like Geary.
Yeah, exactly, or Edderdour, with what they've released now with their embellishing and other stuff, like saying, okay, we used to make these, but it's just the locals who drank this, but we want everyone to try and have this, or Tobermory doing the Lecheg releases, and there was a period of time when they weren't very good, and they've gone back to making really excellent peated malts, or even Springbank. I mean, so you look all over the place. There's different iterations of peated whiskeys that have been made. I mean, I think Balvenie tried that, right? They did their peat week.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that do like a peat week. I know Glendronach did, one as well. And it seems like that's the...
If you want to know, they're using peat in pretty much everything, but you just don't know it.
Who's that? Sorry?
Glendronach and Benriach.
I didn't think they use. I mean, it might be the older Speyside style where you always had a little bit of peated barley in there, but
really it's really underneath it.
Okay.
And the Benriach, it's in the standard release now, because
they have a peated standard release at Benriach.
No, but it's even in the regular non-peated. There is peated whiskey. Rachel Barry reformulated the whole blend, and she put peat in. And my wife and I were very lucky to taste it when it first came out. And they made you guess. They're like, "Oh, try to guess," and none of us were able to guess that there was peat in there. And then they're like, "Oh, there's peat in whiskey," and we're like, "Oh, that's that flavor we couldn't figure out."
Yeah. Well, that's what I said earlier about the Amrut Single Malt was when Ashok took over distilling, he added a little bit of peated malt to it. So the original Amrut Classic Single Malt did not have any peated malt in it, but the one now does. But also the sherry too. And it's an old distiller's trick. If you have a barrel that might taste a little off or a little sulfury, put a little bit of peated malt in it, and it will take that away. So next time you get something like that, try it. So
the phenolic aromatics won't be the sulfur anymore. The peat will kind of
the peat really does. I mean, I think it kills the sulfur. You still get that, but so this is 100% barley that has been peated with malt in Scotland. So I'm not going to say it's Scottish barley. I'm not going to say it's peated Scottish barley, but it is all peated at Baird Maltings and shipped over to the distillery. And so this is their 46% version, 92 proof. It's going to be more akin to mainland peated whiskeys, Ardmore, the Chegg, if you want, that kind of style.
And this will be peated at Baird's to roughly that like 20 ppm target or so.
20 to 22, yeah, Paul. Yeah.
Okay.
If you say this is on, you would put this with Lecheg?
Sorry, Ari, I couldn't hear you.
Leipzig. You said this would be comparable to Leipzig?
No, I'm just giving you examples of something.
Okay.
So, like Ardmore,
Highland Peat.
Leipzig,
No,
Highland
Ardmore
Peat,
I go
Highland
with,
Park,
but because I'd say, okay, the Ardmore is a light peat, and this is this. But Leipzig, I was like, I always consider that a punch in the face peat.
Yeah, it depends on what day of the week it is, what they release.
Yeah, I get it.
It depends on how young the Leipzig is too.
Correct. Yeah. Like with all peated.
So the crazy thing is here, like I get the most peat retro nasally after I swallow, after the finish, but just like breathing in and out afterwards. That's where it's just this nice, pleasant, outdoorsy, campfirey little.
Yeah, I agree. Right, I'm just trying to get the. Okay. I knew you had a couple of open bottles of it, but if you have a second glass, pour the cask strength peated in there to compare it, and you'll really get the phenols coming through the cask strength. I don't want to bias anybody, but to me, this is my favorite Amrut of the regular releases, the core releases.
Okay.
I love their peated cask strength. So this is 125.6 proof.
There's the agave syrup sweetness on the nose, a nice crisp, not even as toasty and heavy as honey, but just like a lovely little.
Yeah, there's a lot of heather, a lot of floral notes, on the sweet floral on there.
Raj, if this is the proof of how much I loved it, I finished it.
Is that? Oh, that's the 46%.
Yeah.
You haven't had.
At the last tasting, I told you I'm going bonkers over this. This is completely.
I thought you liked the cask strength.
I'm sorry?
I thought you liked the cask strength one.
Oh yeah, the cask strength one was, but the peated, because peated was a revelation to me. I didn't know Amrut made such good peat.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. It's great. I mean, this was
because
if they hadn't made the peated, you wouldn't have had fusion, right? I mean, fusion is.
Oh no, I meant peat in excess of 20 ppm. So
I agree.
Peat,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because I'm really big on Bruichladdich cast exploration. If I tilt my camera, you'll see this whole top rack is full of Bruichladdich. So, and when I got the last tasting, when I got introduced to this, I went and got a couple of bottles, and I wiped clean pretty much everything.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say anything about that other whiskey, but
okay. No, I'm a big fan of the Amrut peated cask strength, especially. I think you pick up more of the phenolics in the cask strength than you do in a 46% version. And I could drink this neat all day.
Wow, that cask strength.
The cask strength.
That cask strength is like, there's like a char to it.
There is.
That's really. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely makes you feel like
a good char, Laura.
I'm sorry?
A good char?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I smoke a lot of cigars, and the different chars and everything. I mean, all that flavor is important, And so this one is kind of like that dry charcoal kind of. It's quite nice. Very different, actually.
This to me feels like the.
Do you guys put?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ken.
Oh, go ahead. You can finish.
I kind of get the bark on the, the corn, not the brisket, the bark on the brisket. I get that feel when I'm,
Oh, the char on the brisket.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good point. I always say that, if you want to describe to me, the first thing about Amrut peated single malt is you get that sort of barbecue spice, that barbecued pork belly char. That's because pork can be sweet, right? You get that sweetness of the pork, but that lovely char and that lovely rich flavor. We did a Amrut dinner a couple of years ago in Atlanta, and
do you incorporate sherry? Do Do you incorporate sherry barrels in the peated cask strength as well?
No, not this. No. But the chef had taken pork tenderloins
Okay.
and marinated them in Amrut Fusion, and then taken that and used whatever was left over to season the chips that he was going to grill with.
Oh wow!
Just phenomenal.
Okay, Raj, your Carolina is coming through with your barbecue.
Well,
I don't know if everybody knows where you are.
Ari, I've only been here for 4 years, so I'm not like a diehard.
Yeah, but I'm
Carolinian,
pretty sure you figured out pretty much that what their barbecue style is.
Yeah, but I think I've had enough barbecue from different places too. So yeah.
No, I grill a lot. I grill a lot. Next time we are going to do barbecue and Amrut next time.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that Daniel and I are part of the kosher barbecue circuit.
Yes.
So
you are.
We are actually going to be down in February. Down in where are we going to be, Daniel?
Near West Palm Beach.
West Palm Beach. We are doing a competition down there.
Oh, great.
So
Good.
there's plenty. If anybody doesn't know, there's a lot of whiskey at barbecue competitions.
There is. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, you must know Gil.
Yeah, Gil.
Yes,
We all know. I
is
think
a
we all
very
know
close
Gil.
friend
There are a lot of us
to
know
both
Gil.
Daniel and I. Gil unfortunately can't make it because he has a previous engagement, but he wanted to be there.
Yeah, Gil's great. So,
Now, Raj.
all right. Any
have
questions or thoughts about the cast
I have
strength?
a question.
Yeah, sorry, Keith. Yeah.
So basically, I've been a very big fan for a while, and I think I mentioned one time there was a special release peated one that reminds me of an old Bullmore. And I was wondering, is there any pipeline for a special release peated malt?
Yeah, well, we do. So, if you ever see the packaging, the Atma packaging, these
had that.
are
That was
single
very
barrels
good.
Atmas are single barrels that I select for the U.S. And we've done 100% peated, cast strength. Well, they're not cast strength. Sorry, Atmas are always bottled at 56.5, and I'll explain that in a second. So everyone is different. That would be the only peated single barrels that Amrut would do. They wouldn't do any general ones for the market. So it would be country specific. The reason that so there's different regulations in India where you have to every year you have to file your labels and you have to pay the equivalent of about $1,500 US to re-register the labels. You cannot change the alcohol strength on it. So once you set it, that's it. So we had to make a decision a long time ago that when we were going to do the Atmas, we were only going to do them. We were going to do them at a single level. So they were always going to be 56.5. But the only other one is if you've ever had a chance to get any. Blackadder does some Amrut bottlings, and they have done a peated at 60, 62, 62 and a half, single barrel cast strength.
The tube that you just showed, how does that compare in your opinion? I guess they're single barrels, so they're all different. But do they compare to the cast strength peated that we just tried?
Well, if there was a peated, yes. The one I just showed you is not peated, but if it was 100% peated barley, it would not be as strong. It would be 56.5 versus 62.8. But it would be a single barrel, so you get a lot more flavor character in it.
So the reason I asked is the store I shop at regularly, they have a tube like that with an elephant on it. That's Amrut, and I think it's aged in a peated. It's not peated whiskey, but it's aged in a peated barrel. Does that sound like something you guys would do?
Yeah. So I would have. So there is. I pick every one of these barrels. Okay. So if you look down at the bottom, it'll tell you all the information. So it may have been a peated port.
Oh.
Or peated sherry. Yeah. So it'll tell you. It'll say right on it the type of barley and the type of cask that it was in.
Well, so I stayed away from that bottle because I typically don't like peated. But since I tried your peated stuff tonight and I really liked it, now I'm interested in that bottle if the store has it. So I might, next time I go in there, I'm going to read that and look into it more.
Yeah. And then where in the U.S. are you staying?
Maryland.
Okay, so there is. I took 5 of my distributors to Amrut in February, and each of them got to pick a barrel. So our Maryland distributor picked a peated port cask.
Okay.
Here, but that is exclusive to DC, Maryland, and Delaware. And so that's actually almost 9 years old, and it's peated barley that's been aged in a port cask.
Wow.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Now this store's had this bottle for years, so it's not that, but that's interesting to me too. I'll probably run across that eventually.
If it's the Atma, it is, and if it's not, I think it might be like a pink canister for the exclusive cask for the DC Maryland bottling.
Yeah. Thank you.
That'll be 120 proof.
Nice.
So I will go pick it up.
Yeah,
I had it before. It's very good.
It's delicious. It's really good. Yeah.
I'm gonna look for that Black Adder too, because I bought my first bottle of Black Adder, which actually wasn't peated, which is pretty rare. I think it was Tomatin. It was a 10-year-old Tomatin aged in the PX sherry cask at cask strength. Very good.
Yeah.
So I'll look out for that because I see Black Adder a lot, and I don't really look into it because most of their stuff is peated. But I'll look for the Amrut one.
Most of it's not peated. I mean, the only peated Black Adders that we do are.
Well, in Maryland, the stores that I shop at, the Black Adders that I see is mostly peated stuff that I see in stores, at least where I'm shopping.
Yeah, well, maybe that's what came there, but there's a lot of Black Adders that we do there. They're not peated.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, the majority are not peated. Yeah, from distillery. So, I mean, you get your peat reek and smoking Isla, which are obviously going to be peated, but the other ones aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So, fellows, any more questions? Because we're going to end the streaming at around 8:30.
Okay. We've got 2 minutes. Why don't we quickly just say what your favorite was tonight?
Oh.
I can't.
You can't.
I can't decide.
All right.
Mine's the one that I'm never going to be able to have again.
Yeah.
Which was that?
The triple.
Triparva is still available, Laura. It's out in the market now.
Me too. I mean, I like peated, but Triparva today, yeah, Triparva because it is.
And the peated are my favorite.
Okay.
I won't be able to get it in Pennsylvania though, Raj.
Yeah, you can. I'll tell you. I'll tell you how you can get it.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love that.
Matt, what was your favorite?
Triparva, hands down.
Wow.
And second to that would be the cask strength peated.
Okay. Yeah. How about Ari? Ari's.
I agree. Triparva and the cask strength peated are my two favorites. Like they're neck and neck.
Yeah, I also picked the Triparva and the peated. It's tough to between the cask strength and the regular.
Okay.
And you know what? And I also love the fusion because I like the interplay. So it's tough. I mean, Raj, you know I love your whiskeys. Anything you're importing, you know I love. So it's tough to pick anything.
Okay. Corey, what about you?
So you guys aren't going to discontinue the intermediate sherry, right?
Well, so it was discontinued. We had a release of it last year, which was exclusive to the U.S. We're sold out of it, but I will have another release this year. The problem is the reason they discontinued it is Amrut could not get the quality of sherry cask that they wanted to make it.
Yeah.
So if you can't get the sherry, the Porta Nova is made the same way as intermediate sherry is, but it's instead of going into a sherry cask in the middle, it goes into a port cask, and it is 62.1%.
Stan, you should try
Lord.
it. It's incredible. I would probably
if
give
I
it
see it, I'll definitely pick it up.
Yeah, I'd give it a 1.5 above IS intermediate sherry. Yeah.
Intermediate sherry is fantastic, but the other one,
Can I request?
everything Amrut does is incredible, you know. And it is. I mean, they're available. All of the core line are available in most markets. We're in 46 markets. In the state control, it's a little tougher to get, but Laura in PA, if you reach out to Dreadnought Wines, who are my distributor in Pittsburgh, I'll send you Deb's contact information, and she can order a bottle for you.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
Well, I actually live in PA, but I live right over the state line in Maryland, and I work in Maryland. So if you ever need me to pick anything up for you in Maryland, I do 99.9% of my shopping in Maryland.
Yeah. Sometimes it's less expensive in PA than it is in Maryland, but it just depends.
Yeah.
When you can get it.
The PLCB has a really strange system. But, yeah.
Can I request a whiskey?
Sorry, Stan, go ahead.
Yeah, Stan, go ahead.
Oh, I was done.
Okay. All right. Stan,
So, Raj, closing note from you, and then we'll end the streaming.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed sampling the water of life, and as we like to say that Amrut, it means eternal life, and if you drink enough of it, hopefully you'll have eternal life. So, cheers.
Okay,
Cheers.
friends, thank you for making it. Thank you. Cheers.
Slanjava.
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 Thanks.